Let's go ahead and start. You ready to record? Here we go. Coda, which we already said it was. Reality being what reality being what reality being what of necessity, and a new anti-revisionist epoch of struggle replaces today's tired movementism. There's still the chance that only new failures will be encountered in the course of establishing a new successes. We might succeed in temporarily breaching the distant communist necessity might again be forgotten. Communism regulated once more to the realm of failure, only to be yet again reclaimed by another new left that is even more wary of thinking of communism. We should wonder how many repetitions are even possible. The window in which we can make revolution is closing as the world approaches the Armageddon promised by the logic of capital. The fact of historical necessity is more visceral today than it has ever been. We cannot wait for a spontaneous arrival of the communist horizon when capitalism is nearing its own horizon, environmental collapse and new ice age, the devastation of human existence as we know it, promised by its necessary and day-to-day operations. We cannot. I love how he went into climate and stuff like that, and how capitalism is destroying the climate. Loved it. We cannot afford to tinker with its framework in the hope that the questions of revolution will be solved at some unknown point in the future. We cannot afford to waste our time in spaces and practices premised on the continuation of the system of exploitation, commodification, and internal war. Here, at the centers of capitalism, it is sometimes easy to banish the contemporary nightmare to the limbo regions of thought. While we may understand the logic of capitalism in theory, the gap between theory and practice often prevents us from embracing activity that is driven by the logic of revolutionary necessity. The contradictions of the system are more apparent in the peripheries. At the centers, they are muted by a quote cultural industry that persists only because of the most brutal exploitation and oppression elsewhere. It is any wonder that the imperialist camp's longest war, the war on terror, is not even experienced as a war by the masses who live at the centers of capitalism. Some of us have grown to adulthood with this war serving as an early childhood memory, and yet unlike those who have grown up in the regions such as Afghanistan, have been able to live without experiencing the most direct and brutal effect of what George W. Bush once called, without irony, quote, the task that never ends, end quote. From its very emergence, capitalism has waged war upon humanity and the earth. Communist necessity radiates from the internal war. Capitalism's intrinsic brutality produces an understanding that its limits must be transgressed, just as it produces its own gravediggers. How can we be its gravediggers? Though, when we refuse to recognize the necessity of making communism concretely, deferring its arrival to a distant future, one answer to this problem is that those of us at the centers of capitalism are no longer the primary grave-diggers. The permanent war capitalism wages on entire population as a war that is voraciously experienced by those who live in the global peripheries. Global peripheries means like the global south, everybody. Lenin once argued that revolution tends tend to erupt at the weakest links, quote unquote, those overexploited regions where the contradictions of capitalism are clear. Thus, it should be no surprise that communism remain a necessity in these spaces. It is at the peripheries we discover people's war. Conversely, opportunism festers at the global centers. These imperialist monopolies, where large sections of the working class have been pacified, muting contradictions and preventing entire populations from understanding the necessity of communism. Capitalism is not as much of a nightmare here. It is a nightmare here. It is a nightmare here. It is a critique. The recognition of opportunism that is opportunism itself. We cannot make revolution here. There are no cracks in which to build a militant organization capable of fighting capitalism at the global centers. We might as well wait upon the revolutionary labor of those comrades in the global south to save the world for us. We will embrace opportunism by declaring it an immutable fact. Again, the horizon is placed beyond our reach. Reaching its limits is the business of others. Communism is no longer a historical necessity if we fail to transgress the limits set by capitalism and are instead historical necessity if we fail to transgress the limits set by capitalism and are instead capitulated into the post-apocalyptic nightmare promised by the latter intrinsic logic. In such a terrible event, if humanity survives only to find itself in another ice age or devastated wastelands, it will encounter other necessities that are similar to the necessity encountered in a pre-capitalist past. How to persist as a species, how to build sustainable societies, how to produce historical memory. There will not be an internal communist hypothesis when our existence is determined instead by more immediate questions of survival. The necessity of communism is immediate now. In order to bring this necessity into being, though, we must learn to accept what has been established through every past earth-shaking revolution that has also attempted to push beyond the boundaries set by capitalism. It may be the case that, in one sense, communism is a permanent dream of everyone who lives in the world strangled by capitalism, though a nightmare for the ruling classes. Another sense, however, we should stop thinking about communism solely as a dream, a fantastic horizon. Instead, understand that the ways in which past movements have temporarily made this dream concrete. Belief, briefly, but significantly in succeeding because they reverse the terms of dreaming. Capitalism is the nightmare. Communism is the awakening. Often we find, I love that. Often we would prefer to dream because it is easier. Waking is never pleasant, especially in the early morning, when upon opening our eyes we realize we have to go to work, clean our homes, raise our children, and deal with a host of concrete responsibilities, necessities that we could forget while we dreamed. Hence, communism should be approached as an awakening in shaking off the nightmare of capitalism. The dreamers will also be shaken by the arduous task they must accomplish. Once again, as Mao reminds us, revolution is not a dinner party, nor is it a dream, a utopia, a internal hypothesis, a distant horizon, but it is a necessity that is growing more immediate every year capitalism persists, a necessity that might vanish if and when capitalism death throes obliterates existence. In Borges' story, Piri Manera, author of the Quetzalcoatl, we are entered. I don't know how to say it. Let me find out something. See if it's a word or if it's a different language. Hold on. All right, I got the definition in the word. It won't let me say it. Is an impractical idealist, someone who is guided more by lofty or romantic ideals than by practical realities. Oh, interesting. That one I get. We are introduced to the factional author, Pierre Menard, who set himself the task of reproducing Cavalcanti's Don Quixote. Oh, Quixote. Not another Quixote. I think that's what it is. Quixote? Yeah. Which is easy, but the Quixote itself, rather than a rewriting of the same story in modern times, a reinvention of the proverbial chaotic wheel. Menard ends up producing passages that are identical to the passage of Cervantes' original. And yet, as the narrator informs us, reproduction is impossible despite the word-of-word duplication. The different historical context in which the same passages are composed changes the meaning of both form and content. He concludes that Menard's version of Quixote, though at first glance a reproduction of the original, is superior. Similarly, whereas movementism demands a modern rewriting of the story of communism, we should demand a reproduction that is at the same time not a reproduction, but a rearticulating the theoretical weapons of the past, now by creatively reasserting universalities in today's particular instances. We will remember everything we are taught to forget, and in this remembering, painful as it might be, we will find ourselves standing on the shores of necessity. I love that. Reasserting universalities in today's particular instances. Like the mass lying theory is a universality. So like even discovering through these revolutions, like all the revolutions that we can think of, we can draw the universalities from each of these things and place them in a necessity of communism. I like this, that communism is a necessity. I'm using that phrase, hopefully from here on out, that communism is a necessity. I grew up. I'm 45, by the way. Acknowledgement. Oh, okay. Looks like we're done. All books are ultimately the result of complex social processes in which, behind the author who signed his name to the project, there are innumerable other authors and voices. Beyond acknowledgement, this avoidable fact of history, there are several people who directly contribute to the final version of this book. Okay, hold on. Let's go past this one. Let's read about the author a bit. J. Malford Paul lives in Toronto and works as a casualized contract faculty at York University, where he received his PhD in philosophy. He shares a living space with his partner Vicky, a brilliant artist and caricature, and his daughter Samia, who will invariably lead the revolution once she realizes her mom and books do not count as revolutionary theory. J. Malford Paul regularly blogs at MLM's Mayhem. Oh, wow. They have his blog in this book. If you guys go into this they have his blog. About Killitot book series. I don't know. V.I. Lenin's famously wrote, "Without revolutionary theory, there can be no revolutionary movement. However, such a revolutionary theory adapt at solving a theoretical problems faced by the contemporary revolutionary left has been largely unforthcoming or unavailable. Additionally, due to a prevalent Eurocentrism in North America and Europe, radical tradition books by or about developing world revolutionaries and their movements remain often unheeded and dismissed. This book series hopes to publish the works of theoreticians and activists for around the world, not only the developing world, who advocates a wide variety of marginalized revolutionary politics. These are books that seek to serve as interventions into numerous complicated problems faced by contemporary revolutionary left, and to not only educate but to help forge revolutionary movements capable of the task before it. For more information, they have another website. Nice. Let's see here. No. More books. That might be the end. I might have to start the other book. So we need to end this. Okay, hold on a second. Military strategies of the women and children. Ooh. Our commitment to the communities, mass incarceration. Oh my gosh, they're coming up so much stuff. So there's books and recommendations in this PDF too, and the rest is just So since this book is finished right now, I might go ahead. You know what? I'm gonna read something else that my friend Shante told me to read. Let's start this book.